Good evening. It is Saturday, November the 9th, 2019, and it is 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Welcome to a special edition of Introduction to Criminal Law. I'm Professor Richard Wright. This lecture was scheduled to take place last night. However, due to the fact that I have moved and was moving all day yesterday, I had to cancel yesterday and schedule for tonight. So I'm going to make sure you get some details, some information to benefit you so that you'll know what my expectations are for the next 6 weeks, next 5.5 weeks in this course. So I'm going to start out by sharing my screen. So let's go right to sharing my screen. Right away, you see information on the course homepage, my name, my phone number, and then you see the statement that says students can feel free to call me, text me, or email me any hour of the day, except the 25th hour of the day. It means what it says. It is not a joke. It's kind of a way of letting you know that I'm available when you need me. I put it on students to reach me anytime you need any help. Now, when you do text me, make sure that you include your name as well as the course and the assignment that you're asking about, because I won't know just from seeing your phone number because I won't recognize it. Be aware that oftentimes what I will do is I will end up calling you because of the fact that if you take it that far, that means you need the information right away. Sometimes you'll do it while you're at work, so be aware that that may happen, and that my goal is to help you to get the information to help you succeed and achieve success in this course. And so take me up on it. I've had students in many years who have followed up and been able to be successful providing questions. I received some today. I received some yesterday. And the next thing I want to remind you is about rubrics. Pay very close attention to rubrics in this course. The rubrics are located in each assignment. I will share with you how that works tonight. And I encourage you to use your rubric as a checklist before you do your assignment. Because what's going to happen is when you turn in your assignment and I grade it, there's going to be some feedback under primarily the first section, sometimes the second section, and sometimes even the third section, depending on what issue that you might have in your paper. So pay attention to the requirements of the rubric, and if you satisfy those very well, then you will get your maximum number of points for that assignment. The next two things I'm going to talk about primarily is APA. APA is very important in this school because it deals with academic integrity. I'm going to share in a few minutes some information about academic integrity and how you can accomplish making sure that you satisfy the requirement of operating in the line of integrity. We will kind of briefly look at the academic integrity policy and then listen very carefully to what is said in the video that I'm going to share with you. But APA, pretty much the summary is citations in the body. Not a citation, but throughout the body of the paper, because citations provide support for the statements that you put into your papers. And then your reference should line up with the citations as well and provide that in terms of a reference page. You should also have a cover sheet. Your paper should be written in font that is Roman, I believe Roman 12, and that you should have your papers not single spaced but double spaced. So those are some of the basic requirements. We have tools here that will help you with APA. I'm going to point those out to you. and I do recommend highly using them. Many times students lose points because of the fact that they fail to satisfy the requirements of APA. And if you satisfy some of the requirement, you're still going to lose points because of the fact that you either write by satisfying requirements or you missed something and you didn't satisfy the requirements. The next issue involves critical thinking. Critical thinking is one of the transferable skills that I will be sharing with you today. And these are skills that employers have identified that they want people who are going to be prospective employees to be able to be adept in and be able to be very good at. So if you're going to be successful in school, you include critical thinking in your written assignments, and you also are going to carry that over into your employment, and then you'll be very successful. I have a video that I'm not going to go to, but it's going to be one I'll show you in a few minutes where it's located, and you can look a little bit more on critical thinking, but I'm going to elaborate on that as well. Critical thinking is so important to me because of the fact that I went to law school, and I am a natural critical thinker. What that basically involves is analyzing the material, applying the concepts and principles to align with the facts that you're faced with in terms of resolving a problem. You're also going to run all your papers through Grammarly, as I will, and check the plagiarism box. Now, plagiarism is not just leaving out the citations and references. It is also when you have copied and pasted or taken too much of your sources that you researched on and include them in your paper, but not offset it by applying critical thinking. If you have not enough critical thinking, your papers, if you run them through Grammarly, you'll be able to determine what the percentage is that you will get in terms of losing points. If you're above 25%, you will not only lose points, but we will also report you to the school itself, and we will make sure that you understand that you need to be able to get those things done. So it is very, very, very important that you learn how to use Grammarly. And then I want to point out that you're required to conduct research for all written assignments. That means the sole source of your papers should not be the textbook, and if you do so, you're going to lose 2 points in addition to things that are in the rubric. I already talked about APA, and also remind you part of that is a cover sheet. You'll lose 1 point if you don't have a cover sheet. And then I include some helpful articles that you can feel free to click on that will help you to perform very well as students. In addition, tutoring is available, and tutoring will help you even if you're doing well, because we have student tutors, and these are colleagues of yours, classmates, who have taken the classes and are familiar with what is required, and they work along with you. Now, they're not going to do your assignment for you, and they're not going to give you the answers to the issues, but what they will do is point out to you how to avoid plagiarism hits from Grammarly. They will also be able to remind you of the methods that we require in terms of APA as well. So tutoring is very good, and you can set up an appointment with a student tutor to help you to stay on task when you're doing an assignment. I also include some articles to help you, and you can take time to click on these and or download these. The last one you don't have to worry too much about, the annotated bibliography, but the other ones are very good with helping you in terms of completing your assignments. And then this is the critical thinking video that I told you about. So if you copy and paste this and put it in your browser, you'll be able to see that short video. I mentioned earlier that rubrics are located in each weekly written assignment. That is how important it is that you become familiar with using rubrics, because rubrics help you to complete the assignments in a fashion that you satisfy the expectations of yours truly, as well as what the course developers intended for you to learn for each individual assignment and module. So the rubrics are located again in each weekly assignment. I'll show you some examples of that before we adjourn tonight. And then the discussion posts. Discussion posts are, of course, they should be detailed. They shouldn't be very short. They should be submitted generally, initial posts on Tuesday and reply posts on Saturday, which is tonight. And however, this week, because we didn't start the program for your term until Wednesday, we had a shortened week. So what we do is we include the initial post and reply posts for today, Saturday. I do encourage you in the future to recognize that starting with week 2 and going throughout, that initial posts are due on Tuesdays at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and then reply posts are due Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, with the exception of the final week, week 6. And when we get there, which, by the way, be aware, it moves very rapidly, and these 5.5 courses go very, very, very fast. So, so in discussions, you also should be aware that if you are late with a discussion post, you will lose a point. You also should be aware of this fact, that discussion posts submitted after Saturday, I should say, starting with Sunday, if they're initial posts and reply posts, you will receive no points because the forum technically ends on Saturday night. As I said, week 1 is an exception. Now, I'm going to be a little liberal with grading discussion posts for week 1 for students who are in this T2 situation in the Introduction to Criminal Law. And I also have drugs and crime, which started at the same time. And some of you are in both of these classes. And the other thing I want to tell you is from that point on, starting next week, Tuesday, this discussion posts, initial posts are due by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and that reply posts are due Saturday night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. I do encourage you to submit posts, reply posts, as many as possible. You won't get the extra points, but what it is that it helps make the discussion forum better, and it gives you an opportunity to interact with your classmates since we are online and not in a physical classroom. And so it is important for you to understand this. Now, let me give you an example that, as I said before, your initial post will generally be due Tuesday, your reply post due Saturday. Let me say if you submitted your initial post and reply post that following Sunday, you're going to get a big fat 0, okay? That's what you're going to end up with. So you need to be aware of that, all right? So I don't know why my video is not on there. Let's get my video back on there. Okay, you should be, oh, you know what? No, I am sharing. So then you should be able to see my video, even if I can't see it. Can you see my video? Just type in the chat box if you can see it, so that I'll be able to see, because I don't see it myself. Okay, very good. And so anyway, back to the discussion post, is that your initial post, if it is submitted on before the end of the weekly discussion forum, and you happen to submit your reply post on Sunday, which technically is when it ends, I give my students an opportunity to receive credit for that Sunday post minus a point. So be aware of the fact that the goal is to get your assignment for discussions in initial posts on Tuesdays and reply posts on Saturday by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, with the exception of this week, which you already know. Or if you don't know, then you haven't looked at the announcement. Okay. So now let's look at our schedule for lectures. As you can see, week 1 was scheduled to take place yesterday, which I told you I had to cancel it because of my move, and so we're doing it today. Week 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 will take place every Tuesday, beginning next Tuesday, the 12th. So be aware of the fact that it's going to be a quick turnaround. So our next lecture will be Tuesday night, okay, and every Tuesday night thereafter. You must attend the live lecture or listen to the archive, and each week I'll give you a phrase or word that you need to provide in order to get your points. And then I will record these lectures, as someone has already asked me. For those who can't attend, I do encourage attending if you possibly can, and I will supply you with the link, because what I do with your recordings is I do something a little different than some professors. I take the WebEx lectures and convert them to MP4s and upload them to YouTube, which makes it easier for my students to be able to access the lectures themselves on any system, their phones, on their tablets, on their computers, and other ways as well. But those are the main ways, excuse me, that they'll get them. Now, where it says recordings here, under recordings, you will see the link for a particular week. Today, you will see open house week 1 under here, then week 2 in kind, and then I will also email each of you a copy of the link as well. All right, this is my announcement that you can see that I submitted yesterday that you guys got by email about tonight. And like I said, I don't like to do lectures on Saturday night. I don't like to do them even on Friday night, but I had to do it Friday night this time scheduled because of the short week that we had. And so here's the link for APA assistance. You can click on the guides here and open it up. And then it'll tell you about an APA toolkit, and it tells you other things that you need to learn about APA, about the template, everything. And then there's also what we call a quick start video that can help you as well. So help you learn everything you need to know about APA. All right. Then the writing process, that will help you to, let me close that one, and show you the process for getting your papers completed. I have students who submit their papers to the writing lab before they submit them to me, which is good, but you have to make sure, I think it's 3 days that you have to get it to them in advance so that it'll be a turnaround for you to get it back in time. Okay? So now I want to introduce you to, just for a minute here, let me move this over here. I want to introduce you to the resources tab, which is very, 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 very important. So I'm going to show you a few things on that. First of all, it tells you how to find articles, and it tells you again about APA, and it tells you about Grammarly, as I remind people, for spelling and plagiarism checking. NoodleBib is for formatting, and then the writing guide I've already shared with you, and then there's other items here. You can make an appointment with the librarian. Our librarian, his name is Dennis Johnson. Our Learning Center person is Bethany Marston, and they work together to provide resources to help you guys to be successful. All right. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take a few minutes, and I'm going to take my headset off. Integrity video, and if you can't really hear it, it's not clear, make sure that you go back and listen to it during the course of the school year. So here it comes right about now. Okay.
What is academic integrity? Academic integrity is making decisions in your academic life that are based on honesty, trust, fairness, responsibility, and respect. This means being honest in the work you do, while respecting the work that others do. So what is cheating? Cheating means distributing or receiving answers or information by any means other than those expressly permitted by an assignment's requirements or an instructor. Some examples of cheating include asking fellow students for answers or copying answers during a test, using notes, devices, or materials during the test that your instructor has not approved, purchasing papers from websites or other sources, copying your classmate's work, assisting a classmate in misconduct, and other violations as noted in the academic integrity policy that can be found in all course syllabi. Always ask your professor if it's okay to use notes during a test or to work together with classmates on an assignment or quiz. Now let's talk about plagiarism. Plagiarism means using another individual's work without giving them credit or taking another person's work and claiming it as your work. Some examples of plagiarism are turning in an assignment that someone else wrote, copying words or ideas from someone else. This can be a library resource, course textbook, internet resource, or other material without giving the original creator credit. Failing to put quoted works in quotation marks, or using someone else's ideas in your essays, but changing a few of the words to make it sound like the words are your own. Plagiarism is not just about written words and ideas. It's possible to plagiarize images, graphs, coding, or video as well. So how can you avoid plagiarism? Cite your sources, both in the body of your paper as in-text citations and on your references page. Whenever you want to use words, images, media, or ideas that were created by another person, you should cite that person appropriately as the source of that information.
But how does academic integrity relate to the work world? Isn't it just a college thing?
No. Integrity in the workplace starts with good practices and skills built while you are a student. Would you turn in a project document to your manager as your own when someone else wrote it? Not if you want to keep your job. Individuals can be reprimanded or even fired from their jobs for plagiarism. Following academic integrity guidelines while you are in school builds those skills and ethical practices that carry through to the workforce.
Okay, I understand how they're connected, but what do I do if I need more help?
If you have questions on the academic integrity policy, consult your course syllabus, talk with your instructor or dean, and if you need assistance with APA citation style or how to avoid plagiarism, contact the Rasmussen library team through our live chat or schedule a research appointment on our library website or through the resources tab of your course. If you would like APA tutoring, schedule an appointment with one of our peer tutors on the course resources tab.
Okay, let's put this in here. So that is a little bit about academic. So now you understand why I talk about citations in the body and references at the end. So now let's talk about something that I want to share with you called transferable skills. These are some skills that Rasmussen College has identified that we want to make sure that our students become proficient in, because employers have stated to us that in order to hire individuals for jobs, they're going to make sure that those individuals are proficient in those areas. And so there's 6 areas. So we're going to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to give you some details on these. All right, let me move this out of the way down here for now. So the first 3 at the top here are individual skills, things that you do yourself without interacting with anybody else. And so first one, as you heard me talk about, critical thinking, how important that is. Like I said again, I'm really a fan of critical thinking. And so what critical thinking is, the definition is here. It involves improving your thinking by solving problems and creativity, applying your intellectual standards, and then resulting in clarity about the issues, precision, logic, and reflection. And so again, it's very important. It's your thought process that's demonstrated in your written assignments and your oral responses as well. Digital fluency, effectively employing and understanding digital tools. Digital tools are the way of life today. I went through college and law school without them, but now this thing I'm holding in my hand is a cell phone, and included on here, if you were to look at it on my, there you go, you see all of these apps which you're familiar with, which is short for applications, and including on this is an app that I have my textbooks right there at my fingertips. So also being able to navigate your learning mode, that is the Blackboard LMS, as well as utilizing WebEx, but learning how to use the various systems such as Word and applying Adobe or PDF docs, and understanding about various spreadsheets and things of that nature. So everything is digital now. Everything, even by the way, your television now, it's a giant computer. And computers kind of like around the world. That's why we have people who are IT people who help us out when we run into a problem. So effectively employing and understanding how digital tools operate and using them in the proper context. Information literacy is the third one. That is being able to recognize whether information is, how should I say, credible, and being able to locate information and use it appropriately. One of the things that you'll see throughout the rubric, and you'll hear me say, and you should hear other professors say it, if they don't, they should, that we do not allow Wikipedia as a source, and you will find that that is a bad place to try to get information to use, because Wikipedia, you should know, is a word-based website, which means anyone can change the language, change information, and all of those things. So there's some very serious credibility issues as well. You should be able to primarily use our Library and Learning Center resources, which have all been vetted, and so they're very good, and you'll find credible resources and understanding that. You can use Google and other word searches, Yahoo, but be very careful about the information that you utilize in these situations. But information literacy, because you need to be able to know how to conduct some research, how to come back with information and details that benefit the person that you're doing the assignment for. These next 3 involve your interaction with others. First one is communication. it is important to understand that employers and well as us in the instructors in the educational field want you to be capable of writing, reading, and providing good oral communication skills, and understanding also of nonverbal language. I speak a little Spanish, or as I say, poquito, se habla en español, but I also can use my nonverbal language. You know that when you shake your head up and down, then that means generally yes. That's a consensual. Generally, if you shot it left or right, horizontally, then that usually means no. And so the point of the matter is we learn a lot of things from paying attention to people and being able to be proficient in that. And you should be aware that in law enforcement, it is also very important that you understand how to respect people and understand that there are people from various backgrounds that you're going to come across during the course of your professional careers. Diversity and teamwork. Understanding that and being empathetic when working with people of various cultures, backgrounds, ethnic groups, religious beliefs, sexual preferences, and respecting those individuals is not about whether you agree with them, but that you will respect them in terms of the things that they bring to the table. We will do that here in this course through our discussion forum. Notice that when people say something that you don't agree with, express why you don't agree, provide the details, but don't slam dunk anybody, don't put anybody down, because as I explain to students, it's okay for you to disagree with my position. I don't take points away if you don't agree with me. But what I do take points away from is if you do disagree with me is that you don't follow the standards of the assignment itself, which is objective, and that's what the rubric attempts to do. And so with diversity and teamwork, the world is a better place. You're going to be working with individuals from various backgrounds. We here at this school, Rasmussen College, have faculty and individuals who are on what we call the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. That's the role that I operate with the school, where we share information from various backgrounds and cultures and get our students to understand that we have to respect each other, no matter where people are from. There's no right way to worship according to the way that the law says in terms of operating. And I have a way that I believe, you have a way you believe. That's all up to you, because each person, I will not criticize you, and you cannot criticize or judge me on the way that I worship, or the way that I speak, or even the way I dress. There are people who draw conclusions by looking at somebody by what they think is they're all about within a matter of minutes, and oftentimes they make serious mistakes. So with diversity, we stay away from that. So it is very, very, very important. And the final one is ethics and professional responsibility. We've kind of talked about that already with the academic integrity video. I always say that if you're an unethical student, you will be an unethical professional. You will be called upon to abide by the academic integrity policy when you take your exams. Now, notice that we're not following you around. We're not videotaping you when you take the exams. But what we say to you is that it is important for you to understand that when you take these tests, unless you are told you can use materials, which most of these tests you cannot, then in that instance, then you need to abide by that. And it's also included in the syllabi, which we'll go over the syllabus for this course very briefly in just a few minutes. And so every area of criminal justice has a professional responsibility depending on what areas and fields that you may operate and work in, and you're expected to perform up to the professional responsibility requirements for whatever area that you work in. Okay? So that's what I want to share with you about that. If you want to learn more about it, there is further information available to you as well. All right. So now let's also look at here. If you want to set up an appointment with Dennis Johnson, our librarian, there's a calendar there. There's hours that you can actually have chats as well. So be aware that, and this is information again that's under the resources tab. All right. So now let's go back to the course home page, and let's put this back up here. And I want to point out to you that there is this guide here, and you can click on this, and it takes you to where I showed you were looking at earlier. And if you click on any of these things, it takes you to the various topics that you want to know and learn as well. There's one other thing that I want to point out to you, is that in each school, each discipline, there is a guide for each school. So you click on guides, and it leads you to all the guides, and you scroll down, and you find the one for the School of Justice Studies. Click on it, open it up, and it gives you, there's a picture of Dennis Johnson, the librarian, and it explains a lot of things that about research, data, writing, APA tools, tutoring, and everything that you need to be successful as well. There's also a video to help you understand the tutoring page as far as criminal justice and other tools that will help you as well. So you have a whole myriad of things to help you succeed under that resources tab. So now let's go and take a quick look at the announcement that I sent you, welcoming you to the course, and pay close attention to these highlighted areas when you go through these next few weeks. And again, take a look at these things and become familiar with them. Some real critical things in here, your course mail, where you deal with the communication, and if you have a question that anybody can answer, which is not of a personal nature, you can also include that in what we call general course questions. I can answer it, or one of your fellow colleagues can answer it. Then the syllabus, which is your agreement with the school or for that course. And then I already introduced you to the resources tab. There's a report tab, which I never use. That gives you access to your grade book, and you're able to see your grades. And then there's some other details here. I recommend checking it frequently. And then this is the announcement again about the lecture schedule as well. All right. So now let's look at what we have here for this week. Each week you'll see an announcement like this. Pay close attention, especially the things that are highlighted or either that have a golden or yellow background. So this week we're dealing with crime and the Constitution, and I will generally go over that in details, but I'm not going to do that in this week. Starting next week, I will do that more in detail for each of the ones. So your assignment was to read chapters 1 and 2 of your textbook, A Brief Introduction to Criminal Law, and then you complete the activities, types of law, what is crime, the Fourth Amendment, probable cause, key terms for practice and elements of an offense, classification of a crime, and then there is a practice quiz. You need to become aware of these. Students who take this course have an edge over some of the other courses. The developers put these in to help you to succeed. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how they work. And so then this is a reminder about, the lecture which is now taking place that was rescheduled. And then your discussion assignment for this week is police dogs and warrantless searches. Again, you notice this week that they were both due Saturday, which is tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, about a couple hours from now. And then a reminder that today's lecture is an open house and week 1. And then I want to give you an understanding at the end about this motto, adversity is a springboard to success. You'll learn something about me. You'll understand why I am the way I am when it comes to professionalism. And so now, having given that, you also learned some stuff about me if you looked at the student lounge as well, which I responded to each of you that submitted something in there, and also the information that you included in your emails when you communicated with me. So now let's take a few minutes and let's take a look at our syllabus. So here's your syllabus. Notice it has my name, my phone number, and then it has an email address. Now be aware of the fact that I have 2 emails. I have a personal email which you found in the student lounge, but also my email within the course, and you could send it to me, Richard.Wright. You can either leave the 2 off, or you could Richard.Wright at Rasmussen or Rasmussen, however you want to say it, .edu, and I'll get that in my email that I get. You guys have what we call S-mail or student mail, and then also we have the course mail, which is particularly relating to assignments for a particular course. So now let's go down here. I already told you about the textbook. These are, I told you about these assignments. I told you about discussions. So let's scroll on down. These are the assignments that you have. You're going to have readings each week, discussion posts, and then practice activities. Those are things I encourage you. Don't overlook them because they help you to perform well as far as your exams and quizzes. And you should be aware in this course that there's going to be 2 graded quizzes, which is kind of like midterm and final. One will be in week 3, and the other one will be in week 6. The one in week 3 will involve information that you learn in modules 1 through 3. The one in week 6 will involve information that you learn weeks 4, 5, and 6. And then I already talked about the live classroom. Now, this is a breakdown of the points. Your optimal points are 500, and it gives you the percentage and weight for the assignments. Notice this, your written assignments are heavy as well as your quizzes. See that? So it would be incumbent on me to do well on both of those quizzes. And then your live lecture, you get 5 points for each of your 6 lectures. And that's a total of 30 points, getting it in according to the due date on the assignments. All right? Now, I always make this announcement, and then inevitably someone will come back to me. The grading scale goes from A to F. I only operate from A to B, or B minus, should I say. That's where I work with students, those who are going to fit the mode of honor students and Dean's List. Those are the people that I want to, help you get there. Never call me, ask me, text me, email me about how to get a C in my class or lower. I won't help you because you don't need help with that. You do that on your own. My role is to establish good work habits for you, ethics, and also professionalism, so that you will learn that you strive for an A and get as close to that as possible every time you take a class. And that's how I roll in my classes. So let's go down here. I already talked about the transferable skills, the attendance policy you can look at. Now I want to talk to you about the late assignment policy. Now, be aware of the fact that your syllabi give you the following instructions, that you have up to 7 days before an assignment can't be submitted. Now, don't get comfortable with that 7 days, because here's the deal. From day one that your assignment is late, you lose 10%. So let me give you an example. Okay, Sunday your assignment is due. It's a good paper. You've met the requirements of the rubric. You've followed the module. You've turned in a stellar paper. You're going to get 100. If you turn in that very same paper on Monday, you're going to probably end up with 90 at the most. And then each day it decreases. 80 by Tuesday, 70 by Wednesday, and 60 by Thursday. That's only 4 days. So my point being is that you'll be at the point where you have gotten, look what happens when you get to 60. You see what 60% is? 60% is right at D minus or F. You're hanging on by a thread. And so that's by week 4. Now, so you don't want to find yourself in that kind of a situation. All right? So now, be aware of the fact that I already told you about discussion posts, that I, as your instructor, have been granted and given the power and authority to waive late penalty infractions if I deem that, and not anybody else, if I deem that it was extenuating circumstances that caused you to submit your assignment late. But guess what? I don't know what extenuating circumstances are because you have to share with me what is going on. I will tell you up front that there are some things that are not extenuating circumstances, such as taking a vacation, a planned vacation. It doesn't help you any in terms of getting your extension there. Emergency situations happen, deaths, health, you have computer failures, you have other types of things that life happens to you. Maybe one of your children or someone, your parent or something, anybody, your significant other. The point of the matter is that on a case-by-case basis, I will determine whether or not I waive those points. Now, I never, ever dock a person for military duty because I appreciate that. And so I understand that and that the responsibility that person has. And if their assignments are late and they're involved in an assignment in the military, whether it's reserves or what have you, I'm not going to take points away from that. And I work with them on that. Even with the discussion post, which that's the real exception to that rule there. So if you have a situation, let me know as soon as you can. It is not good to wait 3 weeks and then tell me, oh, you know, the reason why I fell behind is because this was going on 3 weeks ago. I might not be as sympathetic as I would be if I deal with it with you right away. And so these are things that you need to be aware of as far as the late assignment policy. Don't get comfortable with the thing saying, I'll give you an alternative assignment. I gave a student an alternative assignment when he was deployed out to either Iraq or Iran, and he spent the whole course in that country. And he couldn't do something at the end in terms of a project. So I gave him an alternate project. I don't do that often. I think I've only done it once, maybe even twice. Now, something I don't want you to do, if something's going on, don't send me copies of your medical notes from the doctor. I don't need you're adults. I don't need your doctor notes. I don't need your obituaries. I don't need your orders for military, because once again, back to the point that we believe that you're operating in an ethical fashion. It will catch up with you if you're not. And that's what I just want to say about late assignment submission policy. I will pass this and then have you read the academic integrity policy on your own, focusing especially on this plagiarism section, which I've kind of already given you information on. All right, so that's your syllabi. So now, or syllabus in terms of a single course. So now let's quickly, just before we get into the module, let's take a look at the course calendar, which you should all become familiar with. Here it is. And let's click on this. And you see your assignment. You see where we are. We're at the 9th. And you see what I was talking about. We started on Wednesday, and the lecture was originally going to be on the 8th, but I didn't change it on your calendar. I just sent you an email letting you know that. And you can also see that your written assignment is due Sunday the 10th, and your key phrase, that's what these two check marks are for. So if you click on it, you'll see your live lecture comment is due. Now, once you get to Monday, we're in week 2. And you see from here that your lectures then shift to 8:30 p.m. Central every Tuesday, all the way through till we get to December 10th, I'm sorry, where your last lecture will take place. And the course ends on Friday the 13th of December, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. All assignments must be there. And it says in your calendar, quarter ends. So be aware of that. I always remind my students every week about that, because I inevitably have a student come back and say, well, all our other assignments were due on Sunday. I said, yeah, with the exception of week 6, I should say. So that's your course calendar. So now let's go back and let's look at the actual module. And this is what each module looks like. When you open it up, it'll have the topic of the theme for that week, which I've already shared. It'll have your lesson content, which I'm going to skip over, and it has assignments. So I click on this, and it will open up the respective assignments. The initial post, going down here to your written assignment. Now, you'll have the parameters here given within the body here, and it tells you what you need to do. You need to read very carefully the fact that there are 3 scenarios, and that each scenario should be at least 1 page, and then and address the following for each scenario in a minimum of 3 pages, not counting the reference page, which we've already talked about, and nor the cover page. And then you're going to deal with these questions or issues. It tells you here things that will help you to guide. I've already shown you this. So it helps you to learn about these things here as well. So now let's back up. And the rubric that corresponds with that, I told you to get accustomed to it. If you click on View the Rubric, well, first of all, you see the due date. Matches what I told you earlier. And then you have your different scenarios. So you get 30 points or 10 points for each of these scenarios, being 1 page each, and providing the details that they ask for. Very important. The organization of content of grammar and punctuation, you want to pay close attention. Your paper should be written proper grammar, spelling, paragraphs, double spaced, and meets the requirements of that particular assignment. And then APA, which I've already talked to you about. All right? So that's the assignments for week 1, with the exception of the key word or phrase that you need from your live lecture. All right? So that's it for the assignment. So then we come to what I want to show you is your lesson content. Now, your lesson content gives you the objectives of what that module is all about, and it gives some very important bullet points for you. Then it'll give the reading, chapters 1 and 2, which you every week will receive the PowerPoints that will give you the benefit of helping you to outline the material in particular module that you have. So there are sections here this week: types of law, what is crime, the Fourth Amendment and probable cause, key terms for practice, elements of an offense, for practice, classification of crime, and then a practice quiz. Remember, the first quiz is not going to be until week 3, but this gets you ready and helps you to understand the assignment. So you come down here and you take a look at this, and I will normally talk about this, but I'm going to skip over this today. And then you click on the next one, and it tells you the topics. Then you get what is a crime, and it tells you what's a misdemeanor and felony. Be aware up front that a felony is a crime that you commit, which the sentence, which tells you whether or not it's a felony or misdemeanor. If it's a year or over, it is definitely a felony. If it is under that, in terms of a possible sentence, it is a misdemeanor. And so those are 2 things. And then infraction as well. Those are minor issues as well. Jails versus prison. Most people who commit offenses that are misdemeanors go to jail. Those who commit infractions that are taking them in longer than that generally are sent to prison. I'm not talking about waiting for trial. I'm talking about after you've either pled guilty or been found guilty. And then the Fourth Amendment, which is key, the search and seizure aspects of it, the elements of requirement that officers have what we call probable cause in order to arrest a person and also to obtain a warrant. So I'm not going to talk about these things. Some exceptions to getting a warrant, and these are some of these: the plain view exception, the consent, and so automobile exception, search incident to a lawful arrest, and these are just some. And those are very important in understanding whether or not a person has to get a warrant. Now, each week you will have one of these things. So this is like something for practice. Now, after you've gone through all the material, you can click on this, and it will lead you to another page. And then we tell you to use flashcards. Click on that, and then if you see this little thing, click on allowing it, open it up, and then it'll show you. So now what we have here is a minor offense that is often associated with a non-traffic violation and punishable with a fine and demerit points assessed against the driver's record. We call that in common law, go back to the previous one. So we flip the card over, and here's the answer: an infraction. All right. So then we go to the next one, and then a common exception to the search warrant requirement that permits a law enforcement officer incident to a lawful arrest to search the person and the immediate belongings, such as wallet, purse, and so forth. Flip that over and you call that search incident to a lawful arrest. And you go to the next one. Another exception to the search warrant requirement permits law enforcement officers incident to arrest from a motor vehicle to search if they reasonably believe or can explain they are likely to find evidence of the offense which the offender has been arrested, and that is automobile exception because automobiles are mobile. And so these are some of the things that can help you. It's kind of like a tool that helps you to review, okay? So then we come back and we have some more information that will benefit you. Each week you'll see these things. Practice elements of an offense. So you could go through and you go to this assignment here, which is not graded, and you can start the activity, and it has you to click on the element that is not of armed robbery, and so you go down and you put these things in here. Take property with force. So what is not an element? And so submit it. Let's see, am I right? I am correct, because it is not an element of armed robbery. And so you do those types of things. You go down and again, you find yourself there. So now let's go down again. And let's look at this. The practice, no, we're down there, classifications of a crime. So again, this is for practice, and I do encourage you to do so. Start the activity button again, and then match the crime with the proper classification. Damage to property with a 30-day jail sentence. So, which one do you think that is? Which one? Type your answer. Which one do you think it is? Which of these three is damage to property with a 30-day jail sentence? What would you classify that as, or what? Well, maybe we have a little trouble getting it in there, but the answer is this. Look, if it's not the right one, let me show you something. Okay, so let me show you. If you put it here, what'll happen? It's not gonna work. It is not gonna work. So the answer is misdemeanor, and it'll continue on, and that's how those things work. The bottom line is that they help you to get what needs to be done. So then, all this is to help you prepare for your understanding of that module. And then the final thing is, don't forsake the practice quiz. Actually, these are actual questions that you might find on a quiz. What are codified misdemeanors and felonies known as? What are codified felonies and misdemeanors known as? What do we call them? Of these four answers, which one is it? Okay, going once, going twice. What's the name of this course? That's it. Criminal law. And so you do the same thing. The Fourth Amendment is an example of which type of law? Is it administrative law? Is it case law, civil law, or is it constitutional law? Okay. It's constitutional law. So you submit it. And so you see how it prepares you. And each week you will have these, and I encourage you to utilize them for your own benefit. All right? Now, that's pretty much what the first week is all about. Next week we will go into more details, because next week we'll get into your other written assignments. Okay? So be ready so as we prepare for other assignments that come up, like projects and things. So now what I want to do is we come to 9:36. I want to try to adjourn at 10. So I'm going to give you the shortened version of this whole thing. At the beginning, I shared with you that for the announcement, go to course home. I talk about, with opening this up, adversity is a springboard to success. So now let me explain that to you so you understand why I say that. And I will go back to the classroom and you will be able to understand where I'm coming from. So, yeah, I see the answers were delayed. That's okay. That is all right. So let me talk about this. So I've given you information. Adversity is a springboard to success. And this is how it hit me. When I was a 7-year-old kid, I lived in the city of Chicago on the west side, which was a pretty nice community, and then it got pretty rough. Well, my dad and mom, they allowed a man to come and rent a room from them. They had met at a tavern. And so this guy lived there. He had his own room. My father, my mom, and I had at that time 5 young sisters, and I was the oldest at 7 years old. Well, it came to Memorial Day of 1957, and my dad took me to a White Sox baseball game. He oftentimes took me to games, and we came home celebrating Memorial Day, and each of us kids were put to bed. Well, as we were put to bed that night, a fight broke out in the house. The fight ended up in the bedroom where we all were sleeping. And with the noise and commotion, of course, it woke us up. Well, someone turned on the light, and I could see my father in a corner, and the man, whose name was Webster Scott, had him pinned down, reached in his back pocket, pulled out a switchblade, and put the knife and ran it through my dad's forehead. My dad bled profusely, and in fact, he died shortly after that. Well, the man ran out of the house, and a couple days later, he was back in the house. Well, I didn't understand that, but I will tell you what happened. Well, as a result of that, he started sleeping openly with my mom. He no longer slept in the bed. My father was gone. And what they did was they not only processed the case, they dismissed it because they said there was not evidence. And it was stated that my father was the aggressor and that that was what happened. And so therefore there was no investigation that took place from there. So anyway, from 57, after my dad was killed, until 62, my mother, the area was getting pretty rough, gangs, but the gangs didn't try to recruit me because they knew I had lost my dad, and so they agreed not to touch me, and I was off limits. But my mom, during that period, was constantly the victim of domestic violence. She was beaten profusely. She was beaten the way that Tina Turner was beaten in What's Love Got to Do with It, the way that you saw the movie The Burning Bed and other movies that you might see where domestic violence took place, where I personally lived that on a regular basis from 57 to 62. By that time, I was 12 years old. My mom had another child. She had 2 children by this man, and they both were girls. Thus, I had 7 sisters. So my mom decided to move from the west side of Chicago into an area in Gary called Terrytown. It was a community that was really, really a nice community. And she bought a house. The address was 1925 Clark Road. The reason why I know that is because she told us, never forget that, because that was the year I was born, 1925. So anyway, we lived in the house, and an aunt came from Michigan to stay with her and us as one of my mother's older sisters, and there was no violence. The man respected the fact that my aunt, who lived with us during that period, carried a gun. She was just like the character that Tyler Perry's created, Medea. So it was none of that stuff going on. But it still wasn't the best of situations. So anyway, we go speed ahead to Memorial Day of 1963. We had been living there for about a year. My mom had a restaurant in downtown Gary that she shared with a cousin, and they did chili and they did other things as well. The bottom line is they operated that diligently, and people loved their cooking. Well, my mom on Memorial Day of '63 said that she was going to leave me in charge of the house, which she frequently did, and that she was going to go to the restaurant. So she and Scott left and went to the restaurant. Well, it came to early that morning. I had cleaned up everything that night, gone to bed. Everybody made sure my sisters were in the bed and everything. I woke up before dawn, and there was smoke all in the house. And as a result of that smoke being in the house, it became quite clear to me that there was something wrong. I opened up the oven, and there was some barbecue in there, and I opened the door to let the smoke out. When I did that, I looked out, and I saw the car that my mom and Scott drove in pull away. Well, I went and checked my mom's room. She hadn't slept, but that wasn't unusual because that would happen a lot of times. So we went about the business of everybody. Got up later that day with everybody, and we were, going about our business and so forth and so on. And 2 gentlemen showed up at the door and identified themselves as Gary police officers, and they announced that my mother had been murdered and was found dead in Chicago. I immediately lost it, guys, and started yelling, "Scott, Scott," this guy's name. And I had to quickly gather my wits because I realized my sisters didn't have anybody else other than me as the oldest. And they were stair steps, but the baby, she was just about a year old. And so the point of the matter is, it was a tough time. So we were taken from our home in Gary, Indiana, to stay with another aunt, one of my mother's other sisters in Chicago. And when we moved there, she made it clear to us that this was a temporary arrangement, that they were seeking to split us up. And so she wanted us to just be there as long as we behaved, and we had to take care of us. It was like we were hired hands, and we ran through a lot of problems there. So at any rate, my aunt, the one earlier I told you, had stayed with us in Indiana, by the way, from Michigan. She left just before the Memorial Day to go back home to be with her husband. So she got wind of what was going on, and she came back and she announced that she was not going to have us split up, that she was going to have her and her husband, and they were going to build a house in the south, not suburb, but further south, an area called Maple Park in the Morgan Park area. So all 7 of my sisters and myself in 64 rather, we moved into that house in the south side of Chicago in the Morgan Park area. This was the second time I had my own room. The first time was when we were in Gary. So anyway, Immediately, I had more problems because my aunt's husband and I did not get along because he wanted me to take his last name. Well, I didn't want to do that, no disrespect to him, but because I was the only boy, I would carry on the name of my father. So anyway, it was really problematic. My aunt and uncle would get into it all the time. They would pull guns on each other. I mean, they would yell and scream and cuss each other out. It was just really a bad environment to be in. So I took the road of spending a lot of time outside the home, becoming familiar with the local community church called Maple Park Methodist, and spending a lot of time there. I also had a paper route, and I worked at McDonald's. I was involved in sports at school, but because of what I just shared, I had to quit to concentrate on going to work. Well, I found myself in a pretty tough situation. Not getting along with my aunt and uncle. I respected them, but I still had troubles. I found myself where I heard a lady on the radio and I liked her voice. And I asked the aunt if I could go meet her, and I did. And I ended up meeting this lady and asking her to be my mother. Her name is Mary D. She ended up becoming my friend, and then she was in and out of my life. She was, sometimes I stayed with her. And just to put a pin in what happened is years later, after I had gone through law school, she legally adopted me. So now let's go back to 64. The other critical thing that happened in 64 is I found out that Scott was going to be sentenced to 10 years in prison. Well, okay, I guess that was okay. I didn't have a choice. But then someone brought to my attention that with the law the way it was, 10 meant 5. And they further brought to my attention that for good behavior, that this man would end up serving possibly 3.5 years, which is exactly what he did. So as a 14-year-old, that really troubled me. And when I get troubled, I ask questions, sometimes questions that they say I shouldn't ask. But I had gone through a lot, seeing what happened with my mom, from my dad's death in 57 to what happened with my mom in 63, and it was pretty challenging. So I ultimately ended up going to school. I was in 8th grade, and I asked the librarian about something that someone had informed me. Someone said to me, Richard, the reason why that happened is because these people called lawyers or attorneys. I said, I don't know much about them. So I went to school, and the librarian had a book, and she allowed me to check it out. And I took that book home and read it cover to cover. It was all about attorneys. So anybody I met after that, I would introduce myself as Richard Wright. I was 14 and said, I'm going to become a lawyer. Well, when I did that, I opened up a can of worms because I had obstacles coming up against me, starting with the aunt that I stayed with at first that was going to split us up, who said I didn't have what it took and that I should probably try to do a trade. I also had that same issue I was facing at school through a few counselors. It was a challenging time, but I was always one who didn't respond except with action. So I found myself staying with my aunt in those challenged times, going through school, spending a little time with Mary D. But what happened is that I came to the point that my aunt announced that she was going to be leaving that house because she was moving back into the urban area because she was chasing her husband who was doing some things he shouldn't do. Well, I would find out later that one of the things that he was doing that he shouldn't have been doing, because he and I never really got along, is he was sexually assaulting some of my siblings, my sisters. So it was pretty tough, guys. It was some adversity like you would not believe. And so, yep. And so I found myself in a situation. Thank you. A lot of people expressed to me that they're sorry I went through that. I said, oh, it's okay because of what it made me into and what I became as a result of that. So I found myself going to talking to various people, and so the church decided that what they were going to do is they were going to give me a opportunity to attend school with a scholarship. And my aunt and uncle, all they had to do was sign, but they refused to sign, mainly because my uncle wasn't going to allow my aunt to sign, and she didn't. So I announced that when I graduated from high school that I was going to leave. Well, some friends that I met at the church, they told their mother about me and so forth, and so they made arrangements for me to live with them. And then I started school at night at a school called Loop College, which is now known as Harold Washington City College, Chicago, studying pre-law. And so I got that position. It was downtown, and I was going to get a job, which my friend's mother knew someone, and she got me a job as a messenger in a big law firm. So I started working in that law firm, and I'd have to be at work at 8:30 in the morning, and then I would have to be in class at 4:30. I would get off of work at 4, and we didn't have technology then. I had books. I had no car. I studied on what they call the L train in Chicago, and some people call it the subway. And I studied hard on there. And I would have to ride 2 buses and a train to get to work and so forth and so on. So I ended up going through that. And finally I reached the stage where I wanted a family. So I was dating a young lady, and she and I got married. As soon as we got married in 1970, she graduated from high school. I had graduated in '69. Along comes my first child, 71, in 1971. The next one, 72, was another girl. And so we began going to school and working together on that, raising those kids. So I continued in the law firm. Well, the law firm, as a messenger, allowed me to meet different people. One of the people I had a chance to interact with who gave me some good advice was a gentleman by the name of Ray Kroc. For those of you who don't know who that person was, he was the chairman and founder of McDonald's Corporation. And so he encouraged me, and I found myself in that scenario where I'd sit and talk with him. We actually had lunch. We didn't eat at McDonald's, but we had lunch and sometimes even dinner. We would sit and talk. He said he was impressed with me because as a messenger in the law firm, he noticed that I wore a shirt and tie, and that other guys who had delivered packages to him didn't have shirt and ties on. They had polo shirts. But I was always one who always wanted to put my best forward and go the extra mile. That's where I am today, and that's the way that I started out in those days. So at any rate, the law firm, seeing fit to see I was doing well, I was on the honor roll and the dean's list. I was on public transportation with these 2 kids, and I ended up being promoted at the law firm to a file clerk. And then after that, a law librarian. And as a law librarian, I taught myself how to do legal research using books because technology didn't exist. Well, they realized I knew how to research. They knew how to write briefs. I knew how to write briefs. So they carved out a position for me. That position was what they called a law clerk. You know what they call that today? A paralegal. And so I did that. In the meantime, I ended up leaving that school and going to a 4-year institution called Roosevelt University, declaring my major to be political science, minored in business accounting. And I stayed active in the school. I did career days, speaking. I did a lot. I was still very active, working a full-time job, raising kids. So I was undertaking the challenge. I had to do some really serious time management, guys. Very serious. And so as a result of that, I found myself at a point in time when I had to determine, oh, by the way, when I got the job at the law firm, when I got there, first day, and after that, I introduced myself as Richard Wright, and I told every one of them that I was going to be a lawyer. And so I did that with everybody. So anyway, after that, I found myself in a situation where it was time to make a decision. Well, I had to take the LSAT, the law school aptitude or admissions test. I didn't do too well with it, but I said I think I can explain that away. Well, I had decided that I was going to go to one law school and one law school only. Now, it was advisable, and it was given to me by more than one person to apply to at least 3 schools. I said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to apply to the school that I'm going to go to. And I wasn't being arrogant or big-headed, but what I was doing was confident in who I was. So, as a result, I put my application together. Now, the application was about 6 pages long. But when I got through with my application and sent it over by one of the lawyers, it was in a big, big box. About, it was really thick, and it had all kinds of exhibits and documents. Well, the law school had in their material that they didn't do interviews because they had thousands of people interviewing for 250 seats each year. So I got a call just out of the blue of them inviting me to come to the school because they wanted to see who this guy was that was behind this material. So I went to the school, and they sat me in a room, and about 4 people grilled me with questions, asked me about information that took place when I was in my childhood, asked me about the information that was included in my writings and so forth. And then they adjourned, and they came back. Seemed like an hour or 2, but I don't know how long it was. They came back, and one of the people was a spokesperson and said, we appreciate you taking the time to come. We are very impressed with you, but we don't use this process to determine whether or not we accept students. But what we want to say to you is that we were so impressed with you that what we're going to do is we're going to send you some correspondence the next few weeks that we think that you will like. People that was their informal way of violating their policy and letting me know that they were interested in me. A few weeks later, I received a congratulatory letter from Northwestern University School of Law, where I was accepted into the class of 75 and to graduate in 78. So this is a good school. This is a tough school. It's a challenge school. It's an expensive school. So one of the first things that happened is I graduated with my degree, and my ex-wife now, first wife, who I had married, she graduated with a degree in education and became a teacher for the Chicago Public Schools. I was told by the school that I could not work because it was such a strenuous program and that it required all of my attention. So I began to do that. But then what happened, and it was working all right until the Chicago Public Schools did something they did just recently. Back then, they went on strike. And the strike was quite clear it was going to last a while. Well, it began to put pressure on us financially. The lights were turned out. We ran out of money for food. We ate out of cans and stuff like that. And we sent the kids to my wife's mother at that time to stay with them. They just didn't live too far from us. But they would come home, but they would go over there. So it was a struggle. I actually read, just like Abraham Lincoln did, by candlelight. I studied in the dark with candlelight. And guess what? I did pretty good. but it was just taking a toll on me. So finally, I went to a young lady who was new at the law school. Her name was Joyce Hughes. Professor Hughes came from Minnesota, and she said, she was I forget which class she was teaching that I had. So I went and talked to her because I confided in her and said, Joyce, it's really tough. I think I'm going to have to take a leave of absence because we got a lot of problems. She said, before you do that, I want you to come to my office and sit down and talk with me. So I did. I went and talked with her. She had me to sit down. She stood in front of the only exit from that other than the window and said to me, young man, I'm going to keep you in this room until you agree that you're going to stick this out, because I think you can do this. So I said, I don't know, but she was firm with it. And so, long story short, I took her up on it, and then 3 years later, I graduated in 1978 with my law degree, which you see the picture if you look in the student lounge. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. As I was in that school, one of my classmates, a young man, was a year in front of me. His daughter was a distinguished criminal defense lawyer, and he took me and several other attorneys, young law students, home, and we met his dad and mom. And his mom would cook for us, but her husband, his dad, my classmate's dad, wouldn't let us eat until we did some studying. He would drill us at his house and around his kitchen table. So it was very interesting. We learned a whole lot. Well, after everybody left, I sat and I shared with his mom and dad what I had gone through. His dad said, well, you need closure. And then he took me to the criminal courts building called the Layton Courthouse, 26 in California and Chicago, and got the records so that I would get the records pertaining to my father's case in 57 and my mother's case in 63. And I have those files to date. Well, he also said to me, I want to make a recommendation to you which might be kind of challenging. He says, I know what you went through. I know it was tough. He says, but I would recommend you don't become a prosecutor. I don't know what made him think that. I never said that. But at any rate, I listened to him, and he says, you're going to learn more if you become a defense lawyer. So I decided to become a defense lawyer. I announced to the law firm that I was going to work for a few years more in corporate law, but I really wanted to do criminal law because I wanted to understand what happened. So anyway, I ended up leaving the law firm in 2 years out of law school, starting working with some other lawyers. I didn't like their ethics, so I started my own practice. I started doing radio, if you're my friend on Facebook, which by the way I invite you to, Richard Wright JD space, which is for Juris Doctor, send me a friend request. I'll accept it. You'll see a whole lot of information about me other than what you see in the student lounge. So what I ended up doing was I started doing radio, a show called Know Your Rights, and rights was spelled W-R-I-G-H-T-S. And I started doing criminal law primarily. But also because the lady I told you about earlier, Mary D, was in my life, she asked me to help her out with some contracts. By this time, she was on her way in her career at a radio station, and where originally I had met her, and she was doing other stations and doing a little local TV as well. So she introduced me to other individuals, and so I learned how to do entertainment, sports, radio and TV. I had already learned about real estate because the big corporate law firm that I worked for, by the way, when I became a law clerk, I used to go to court. I used to go to real estate closings, and I'd go to big meetings. I went to some meetings when Ray Kroc would announce different things he was going to do, and I'd just sit in the corner and listen. I was like a sponge, soaking it all in. So at any rate, here I am out here practicing, and I started the law firm Richard H. Wright and Associates. It grew and became very popular. I was advertising on radio as well as I was doing my program on 3 or 4 radio stations. One of the things that happened to me is that my mentor, who became my mentor, Eugene Pencham, that was his name, who suggested I become a criminal defense lawyer. He and I would talk a lot, and he became a judge, and I would get appointed to cases along with other lawyers in his courtroom. And he was tough on us even as a judge, tougher than even with everybody else. So I did pretty well. I had discovered something that when I was in law school and taking the bar, well, I kind of knew it before that I had what they call a photographic memory, and I could remember things. And just like the photographic memory is the reason why here I am, 69 years old, 2019, be able to describe clearly what happened in that room Memorial Day of 1957 at that location where I was living on the west side of Chicago. And remember all the details vividly. So anyway, I was doing pretty well. And so my first wife and I had our third child by the time I graduated, and it was a girl. And then we, after that, worked together for a while and decided that we would go different ways. And we amicably split. I went about my life, and she went about hers. Well, I met a young lady after that who was a client, and we started dating, and then I got married to her. And she ended up inviting me to her church, and they had the theme at that church, God is able. And that became a very important thing to me, and even today it's important. If you look at my Facebook page, you'll know why I say that. But I also just share with you, I pastor a church now, which is called God is Able Christian Church, and I also have a radio show that I do as well, now even. So I found myself changing my life, becoming a Christian, and in my second marriage. And then there came another child, and it was a girl as well. So I had these 4 girls. Now, in the marriage with my second wife, her mother in '89 ran for and was elected the mayor or president of a village in the south suburbs called Ford Heights. She asked me to be her village attorney. I says, I'll be that, but only if I can carry a gun. She says, only law enforcement officers can do that. So I says, well, what can I do? She said, well, if you want to, we can't pay you, but you can become a part-time police officer and go to the classes that they have and training. So I did. I took those classes. And I then became a sworn officer. I ended up working the streets, but I didn't wear a uniform. I always wore plain clothes. And then I also participated in drug raids, traffic stops, when roadblocks and all those things. So I did all of that stuff. So from '89 to '93, I was the village attorney. I was the village prosecutor. And then the chief of police had to step down for some illegal activities, and a new chief came in. And he identified me as a clean young man, and he asked me if I would work with him on his internal affairs investigation, so I became an internal affairs investigator. So all that happened '89 to '93. In the meantime, I went to seminary '91 to '93 to study about the Bible and everything. Trinity Evangelical was in Deerfield or Bannockburn, and we had classes in the urban areas as well. Well, I would discover that my ex-wife, number 2 now, and my former pastor, who I had joined their church, were carrying on. And so I ended up getting out of that marriage. So here we are after, oh, let me back up. In 1984, my mentor, Eugene Pencham, said to me, you should go to this National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers seminar in San Diego in July of '84. So I did, and I was placed into a group. We were split up in different groups, and the guy that was over my section, his name was, exactly how I'm going to say it then, his name was John Cochran. And so I sat under him, and I learned some stuff for like a week, or seems like it was 10 days, I think it was. So I learned from him. So then, of course, 10 years later, after I was dealing with, divorce, who did I see on television representing O.J. Simpson but this guy called Johnny Cochran? And I said to people, no, that's John. And they said, no, his name is Johnny. So I went back and got pictures, and I showed it to my friends and so forth. Well, it was him. And so anyway, I was a person who reported on the O.J. Simpson case because it was one of the most publicized cases for about 3 or 4 radio stations, and I was paid to do that. So it was a good gig, and I still had my law practice going at the same time. I still had my radio show going at the same time. So I was doing pretty good. So as I said earlier, my ex-wife, number 2, and I went separate ways because I saw what was happening. Well, after that happened, I met a young lady, and she and I became friends, and she and I are now married and have been married 25 years. She pastors the church with me. She's the mother of those 4 children that you see in my picture in the student lounge. And so I went from all of that. I went through all of that. And so as we got married, she and I, it became clear that I was going to be retiring from being a lawyer. And I was only 50 years old. And that was in 2000. And we'd only been married, we got married in '94. So almost 6 years. But I was done practicing. I had accomplished what I wanted to. I learned about what I wanted to learn. I represented many people. By the way, when I was a criminal defense lawyer, I was really good with representing murderers, defending them. Somebody said, what? I said, but I learned how the system worked. And I also had a chance to minister to those individuals as well. So I did all of that. So anyway, announced that I was retiring. I told my staff that I was closing the office, and I did, 90 days after I announced it. And I started doing menial things. People were like, they thought I had a nervous breakdown. I said, well, I'm not a drinker or a smoker, but that's the way that I was led to go. So I got the opportunity to work for a janitorial company, and I became the head of the janitorial company for a company called Service Merchandise, which went under 2 years after I started the job. And I was responsible for handling the 26 stores in Illinois. And so I was good at that. I was given a nice salary, and my wife and I, we ended up next coming on. Here's '95. Here comes my first son. Finally got him, Richard Jr. And it was emotional for me because that was the first time Richard had joined together since my dad was killed in '57. His name was Richard as well. So anyway, she and I bonded, and I ran that business. And then I started teaching special education, dealing with at-risk children, at-risk youth. I found out that I affected positively the lives of several of those individuals. In fact, one of my students, without me realizing it, years later connected with me through Facebook, and she became a criminal law professional. She said that she always remembered how I approached things. The point of the matter is that I've been out here working and helping for a long time. So then, janitorial company went under. So I started doing closings with a title company, helping people to refinance their houses. And then I reached a stage where that was kind of, okay, it was coming along. So we come to 2011. Now, between that period of time, I had my daughter, who's now 20 years old. I had my son. And by the way, the 20-year-old, she's a student at Rasmussen now, studying she's studying medical assisting. And then my 24-year-old son, he decided not to go to school, but he's with us. And so then my 19-year-old son, he's in and out, and he wants to do his thing. And then I have an 11-year-old daughter. At my age, I have an 11-year-old. And so it's exciting for me. So anyway, I continued to live my life. And then in 2011, my wife's mom passed, who I was very close to. And we ended up moving from where we were living, selling the house that we had, and we moved to an area called Lakewood Falls in Plainfield. Well, in the meantime, somebody approached me about this job. They said, there's this school that's looking for somebody to teach business law. And I said, where's this? And they said, it's called Rasmussen College. I said, never heard of it. And so I did research, as I always do my due diligence. And I said, this is a for-profit school. I said, I don't think I want to get in that area in the news. Not that school, but that for-profit colleges were catching it. So I said, let me do some research. So I did some further research, and I discovered something that made me change my mind and decide to want to go teach at this school. I found out that the chairman of the board was a former president of Northwestern University, not the School of Law, but of the university itself. So I ended up interviewing for the job and was hired as an adjunct professor teaching business law residentially at the Romeoville campus. Well, it was tough, too, because you didn't get a lot of money as an adjunct. But I made it clear to the dean, I said, listen, I am a criminal justice individual. That's what I like. So they transferred me then into the criminal justice program. Once in a while, I would still teach business law, business ethics. I taught medical law and ethics as well. So anyway, I continued to move forward in teaching that. They came to me in about 2013 and said, you know what, your program is going to go online. I had never, ever taught or done anything like that. So I ended up having to learn the systems, and I became an online instructor. Well, in 2014, it became known to me that there was a full-time position that was available and in criminal justice, so as state program coordinator. So I applied for the position, and of course you know what happened. Yes, I did get it, and I became the state program coordinator responsible for all 4 schools in Illinois in the School of Justice Studies program: Romeoville, Rockford, Mokina, Tinley Park, and Aurora. And I did that until 2015 while teaching 3 classes. And then they changed in 2015 to do away with the state program coordinators, and I became a full-time teaching 5 classes. And since that time, I've been doing that. And during that period, we went from 11-week classes. Now many other classes are going to 5.5. And I continue to meet students and to help students. I have formed relationships with students that I've had from when I started at the school, that I've helped them by writing letters of recommendation. I made phone calls. I've done all kinds of things. And I continue to do that. And so as an instructor now, I want to conclude by letting you know that that's why I say adversity is the springboard to success. I am living proof that you don't let your situations dictate how far you're going to go in life. You take your situations that are negative and you don't look at it as half empty. You look at it as half full and use that negative activity or experience in your life to use it to progress. And I made my success as a lawyer, and I'm making it as a professor. I've decided to commit myself to sharing with students and helping them to the extent that they want to be helped. And I have had a few students that said to me, I can't. And I says, we're not going out like that. And we're going to get this thing done. And so I know, I saw what you wrote in the student lounge. And so I understand totally that a challenge can drive you, break you, or give you the ability to launch. People, that's why I say to my students, we are a team. I am the coach, you're the players. Everybody does their role. I teach, preach, and share whatever you need. And you take it in, and then you apply it. And if you don't understand something, come on back. Let's keep on doing it. I have had students who didn't pass my class that became close to me because they realized it wasn't because of me. They realized that they did, and then I encouraged them, keep coming. Let's do this thing. And so that's the way I am today. And so I wanted to take the time. I went over my time, but I wanted to make sure that you guys understood who it is that you hear from in these lectures, who it is that you signed up for as a class, then not knowing me, who is your instructor, who is your professor. And so I want to tell you that, and I'm looking at the notes now. I'm going to go back and look at the notes. Okay, we can talk about that. We can talk about that. Going to Boston. That's what. Yeah, I would be happy to share. Just we can talk about that, how we can do that. And then I want you to understand that I open up, as my student here is saying, sharing my heart and purpose. Yes, good. I like that. And then I say, just do it. That's it. Don't let barriers stop you. I've had a number of students who said they want to be attorneys, and they said, "Oh, but it's challenging." And I said, if I can do it, I can help you. And I still help students. I have a student now that I met when I was teaching residentially. Domestic violence was my first class she had with me, and they learned at the very first session when I gave them my story without my name, and they wondered, where was that person who was described in that story? And I said, it's your professor. They rallied around me. And so this one student, she says, I want to be a lawyer. Well, she graduated. She went and got her bachelor's after associates in 2016. She's studying for the test to get into law school, and she's continuing to do a lot of things. She is a corrections officer. She started out and went up the ranks, became a lieutenant, and then a major at Illinois Department of Corrections, Stateville. But I have had other students, and I'm always willing to take on more to help you to achieve student success. And so I'm going to say good night, get back into stuff. If you saw, I'm in my home that we were blessed yesterday to close on. We had been in an apartment since 2017, and not, yeah, 2017. We had rented some houses before that, and so I am extremely exhausted, but I wanted to take the time to share with you guys. So I'm going to say good night. No, I have not forgotten. I'm getting ready to give it to you. The key word or key phrase is very simple. I've talked about it for the last hour: adversity. That's it. Give that to me, and you will get your points. So I'm going to say good night to you guys. I got to get ready. I got to preach tomorrow at the church, so I'm going to be doing that. And then I also got to grade some papers. I'm going to also be taking this lecture and converting it to MP4, which takes me a little while. So you may get it sometime tomorrow, but you will get it. So I'm going to say good night to you. Oh, by the way, that reminds me, your key phrase is due tomorrow, but I'm extending it. I'm extending it because since we're just doing this now, I'm going to extend it to anybody. You give me your key phrase anytime during the course of the week, and I'll give it to you. But you got to give it to me before the next week. This week coming up is over. That's about as fair as anybody could ever be. All right, so good night, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Remember, at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard, and hopefully our sessions then from that point will be close to an hour. So good night.